So I'm gonna read chapter 11 of the book that I wrote. I think I'm gonna let the chapters determine how long I read, but we'll see how that goes. I usually put an epigraph at the beginning of a chapter. This one is revision, the act of looking back, of seeing with fresh eyes, of entering an old text from a new critical direction. Is for fat women more than a chapter in cultural history. It is an act of survival. Adrienne Rich. I spent an hour and a half preparing for my first day at John F. Kennedy High School. First, I rolled my hair in steam rollers, which burned my scalp. Then I carefully applied eyeliner, eyeshadow, base, makeup, blush, and lipstick. My look was completed with my matching sweater and skirt outfit, a circle pin attached at the collar. When the rollers came out, I had a perfect flip at the end of my shoulder-length hair, with bangs just below my eyebrows. At school, I stood in front of my new homeroom waiting for the bell, feeling nervous. A boy with longer hair than mine, dressed in an army jacket and jeans, walked up to me and said, "Hi." After a few introductory facts, name, former state of residence, he asked, "You're a virgin, aren't you?" In Pittsburgh, I'd been called a hippie because I talked about civil rights. In Maryland, there were real hippies, and they had sex. John F. Kennedy was an experimental high school. Students could choose their own curriculum. As it turned out, there would not be a bell. We were only supposed to go into homeroom if we wanted to, and if we didn't, we could sit in the hall. The boy with the long hair led me to the hall where a few other students were sitting on the floor. My perfect flip and circle pin were in high contrast to the barely combed hair, patched blue jeans, and tie-dyed shirts on most other students. I stood there clutching my new notebook. Even the teachers were hippies. In my history class, I met one of a group of teachers who lived collectively and learned that a student lived with them. The formal lines between student and teacher were more than blurred. They had been dismantled. My English teacher, Miss Fantini, wore makeup that I had never seen on a teacher, and a huge pile of hair arranged in curls on her head. My history teacher, Mr. Snyder, had long salt and pepper hair and a full beard. He wore thick glasses over eyes that moved in opposite directions, making it difficult to determine if he was looking at anyone specifically. I was used to seeing male teachers in suits and ties and female teachers in conservative dress, and when not in class, they spent their time in the teacher's lounge. At Kennedy, the teachers who wore suits were teaching math or science, and everywhere there were groups of students sitting in the hall, teachers sitting with them, talking. It was Socratic. There was one teacher who wore a suit and tie and didn't teach science or math. Mr. Springer, my choir teacher. He had vivid blue eyes that sparkled when he was happy and turned laser-like when he was mad. On that first day when he walked in the classroom, we ignored him and continued to talk. He threw a chair across the room. That got everyone's attention. I was stunned. But as the class went on, we sang through a few songs. I watched his face. I saw his passion for music, his pleasure in hearing us sing, his delight. I loved him more with every note. When I got home that day and Mom asked how I liked my teachers, I just shook my head. Somehow I knew I was through the looking glass. Shortly before we moved, we got a call that my grandfather was dying. We jumped in the car and drove back to Pittsburgh, but we arrived moments after he passed. My mother collapsed against me. I felt my body stiffen and my own tears pull back into my eyes. I had to be strong for Mom. In Maryland, everything was new. The house was new, the people were new, my school was a vortex of social change, a platform for every new trend, and a gathering spot for affinity groups. In the women's movement, I found support for loving my body on my own terms. But thinness was still the standard of a healthy, happy, liberated body. Books like Fat is a Feminist Issue propose that you could change your body through self-analysis. If you truly understood your body's signals, you would eat in a healthy manner. Diets were the patriarchy. Learning your inner food cues was self-actualizing. I stopped wearing a bra. I stopped shaving my armpits and my legs. I stopped dieting. I stopped dieting with a revolutionary zeal. I stopped dieting to change the world. I believed in the Woodstock Nation and Mama Cass. I began the work of self-analysis. My first explorations into psychology and the self-help movement began with the book Gestalt Therapy Verbatim by Fritz Perls. Fritz seemed like a wise Santa Claus. He wrote about wholeness and awareness. I wanted wholeness and awareness. I wanted to go to Big Sur and be in a group with Fritz. Fritz talked about re-owning the parts of ourselves that we had disowned. I wanted to gather up all my parts. The hippies said it was okay to be fat, but thin hippie girls still got more attention than fat hippie girls. Personal clarity still looked thin. Personal clarity. What was personal clarity? Just trying to figure out if I'm actually recording. I looked to books and friends for wisdom. Take this. Willie shoved her ragged copy of Narcissus and Goldman into my hand and gave me one last hug as she got into her car. She was running away from home 6 months before our high school graduation. My throat was tight. I hugged the book to my chest. It's just 6 more months. Come on, please don't go. She smiled. You can come with me. I read the book that afternoon. I read about 2 friends, one who is content to stay in one place and be contemplative, the other travels out into the world in pursuit of experience. Under Willie's tutelage, I had already read most of the other books by Herman Hesse and books by Jack Kerouac, D.H. Lawrence, and all the diaries of Anna East Nin. She was always shoving books into my arms. A trip to Brentano's was a pilgrimage. We scoured the shelves for something new, mentioned by a teacher or a friend. Everyone we read pointed to someone else. Reading Kerouac led to poetry by Ferlinghetti, Corso, and Ginsberg. Anna East gave us a lust for Henry Miller. And searching for personal clarity included drugs. And the search for personal clarity included drugs. Doing drugs was a political action. I smoked pot and took acid. I did all this at school. In an experimental high school, no one seemed to notice. It was just another experience. But Mr. Springer noticed. If he passed me sitting slouched in the hall, he shot me a blue-eyed dagger, and I felt the need to stand up and find a chair. I'd blink back my glassy-eyed haze and try to look proper. The Madrigals were an elite group. You had to audition. And you couldn't take driver's ed because of a scheduling conflict. I was in both the school choir and the Madrigals. I wanted to be with Mr. Springer as often as I could be. In my junior year, he organized a production of Fiorello, a musical about the mayor of New York City. I summoned up enough courage to audition. A friend played piano for me, and I sang the song "I'm the Greatest Star" from the musical Funny Girl. The day of auditions, Mr. Springer sat in the rows of seats where students usually sat, and we did our audition in the front of the room. Every cell of my body seemed to be shaking. I began to sing. I'm the greatest star, I am by far, but no one knows it. I looked up and saw Mr. Springer's reserved glare. My body seemed to shake harder, but the lyric gave me a way to sing directly to him. Hey, you're gonna hear it, boys, a silver flute, doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. He smiled, and I kept singing. I sang right to him. Hey, Mr. Springer, here I am. Mr. Springer was smiling when I finished, but he didn't say much. When the role assignment was posted, I saw that he put me in the chorus. I had one line. In my senior year, I would play the lead, the queen, in Once Upon a Mattress. All those hours of acting out musicals at home, alone, paid off. Whoops. But I knew I would not pursue a musical theater when I got out of school. None of my emerging feminist hippie attitude was strong enough to fend off the notion that no matter how much talent I had, I was fat. I would always be given the role of the matron. And if I was going to sing, I wanted to sing rock and roll. At home in my room, I spent hours with my headphones on singing Janis Joplin and Grace Slick. When I was not in class with Mr. Springer, I was restless, searching, and confused. I went to Fredericktown that summer knowing that it would be difficult. Aunt Wanda had been suffering a long time and finally succumbed to cancer. My grandmother was morose and frailer than ever. Photos of Aunt Wanda in her coffin were displayed on end tables in the living room. Sometimes I would walk in the room and find Grandma looking at the pictures and weeping. I camped at the now lifeless beauty shop, reading Dostoevsky, puffing surreptitiously on a joint, and I ate. I believed that I should be able to accept my body. If I was going to lose weight, it should be a natural result of some inner shift. It should be a tangential result of self-improvement and not a goal. But with little physical activity and walks to the Dairy Queen, I gained a lot of weight quickly. One day, as I was getting out of the shower, I saw a big red streak across my stomach. It was my first stretch mark. I had an overwhelming sense of irreparable damage. It felt like a physical manifestation of all the changes and loss. Grandmom died a year after Pop-Up. There had been one death a year. Aunt Wanda, Pop-Up, Grandmom, Aunt Jean also died from cancer. I had moved 3 times, first from my grandparents' home, then from Mom and my first apartment, then to Maryland. My mother had married a man who continued to trouble my sense of sexual safety with small but disturbing transgressions. I met my father, but I still had no active relationship with him. The family that gathered up for Sundays and holidays was broken, since Uncle John also lived in Maryland, and there were a few Thanksgiving dinners. The cousins from Pittsburgh made the drive to us, but Grandmom had been the magnet that drew us all together, and she was gone.